Welcome to Joy, Love, and Abundance, designed to lift up and explore the people, organizations, and experiences that create a more joyful, loving, and abundant world. Join hosts Rodney Eric Lopez, Patrice Tanaka, and Cyrus Webb as they share stories and insights that will inform and inspire you. Enjoy today's broadcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Joy, Love, and Abundance, and I hope that you have had a great week. I'm Cyrus Webb, excited to be back with my friends Rodney Eric Lopez and Patrice Tanaka this week. Hello to the two of you. Missed you guys last week. We had some crazy weather here in Mississippi, so I didn't know what was going to happen, but it's good to be back with you two.
Welcome back.
Yeah, good to be back.
Well, look, a lot has been definitely happening in the world, right? And I know our audience has been keeping up with all of that. And what I said to the two of you as we were kind of going into this show is that I think, you know, there's been a lot of coverage about the events in the world, but there are two things that I think have been really interesting for me, and I'm curious as to your thoughts about this for our audience. And that is, of course, for one, the verdict coming in for the former Minneapolis police officer, Derek Chauvin, being found guilty on all three counts that he was charged with. And it was interesting seeing people talk about being able to take a breath and how the relief kind of helped them, even like they were even connected to the case, even if they did not know George Floyd personally or have any direct connection. They felt that relief just, you know, in their own lives. And the other thing is the amazing, I think the historic in many ways, the news about the Senate passing the bill to target anti-Asian hate crimes. And I think the response to that, and I think, you know, just seeing the way people respond to that, guys, I was curious for our audience out there. I mean, what has it been like for you to be able to find breathers in your own life? We all are going through stuff. I think all of us can attest to that. It's been a challenging year. I'm curious as to, for the two of you, I mean, where do you kind of go to find that breather to kind of get that courage and that ability to move forward?
Well, for me, I think, and for everyone I know, we were holding our breaths until the verdict was announced. And I think we all let out a collective sigh that, that Derek Chauvin was found guilty. And, you know, I just cannot even imagine if he had not been. It's hard to even consider what that would have been. But, for me, there's hope that maybe there's recognition that, you know, we need to change the way that that policing is done, so that, you know, we don't end up with people dying, you know, for misdemeanors and, you know, petty crimes. It's just ridiculous. So anyway, it was a exhausting but gratifying week that there was some accountability in this instance. So, you know, which has given hope for other news.
Yeah. Rodney, but what about for yourself?
I couldn't agree more with what Patrice just said. I think the country held its collective breath, right? I think it's 333 million people. If you can imagine 333 million people all holding their breaths at the same time and waiting for the announcement of this verdict, I think it was certainly a moment of, the world is watching. And when that verdict was announced, like Patrice said, I think that it did create a space for a breath. And like you set it up there, Cyrus, like a moment to breathe, because it just felt like for at least an afternoon, and really not even the full afternoon, because there was another tragedy, you know, right around the same time.
Right.
But for at least for a day, it felt like our stated values as a nation aligned, with jurisprudence and with the justice system. And so to answer your question, what do I do? Actually, honestly, I turn to the breath in a very literal sense. I think that we all go through our lives, many of us, we may go through an entire day or even a week without taking a real breath, like an actual deep cleansing breath that goes down into the diaphragm and down into the solar plexus and actually release stale air that's in our system, because we're so on the go and we're so running from one thing to another that we can often just spend days at a time taking shallow breaths. And it's interesting because not just 2 days ago, I happened to be channel flipping and happened to stop on the Ellen show, Ellen DeGeneres' daily talk show. And I caught the last few minutes of it, and she had as a guest Andrew Weil, who is a longtime leader and an expert in integrative medicine. And I actually saw him talk. He just spent his entire segment talking about breathing. And he talked about this specific kind of cleansing breath where you inhale for 4 seconds, you hold your breath for 7 seconds, and then you exhale, with noise for 8 seconds. And that if you do that for several cycles twice a day, he claims that it actually reverses some very significant, health issues. And I thought, wow, like something as simple as a regular intentional breathing technique can actually have incredible health benefits. And so I'm glad that you picked this concept of breath, because even though when you first proposed it, I was like, I don't know what we're going to talk about. But then it made me think, duh, you can actually talk about breathing, actual breathing, because there is value in doing that. So that's really helpful for me and a good reminder for me to do my own breathing.
Yeah.
Rodney, you reminded me, of a book I just read called Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art by James Nestor. And I actually bought it as an audio book and listened to it in my walking the hallways here. And it's shocking how healing just taking deep breaths, can be in terms of, the whole body. So I highly recommend, that book to anyone who is at all interested in just healing yourself through breathing. Anyway, sorry, Cyrus. I had to.
No, you're fine. One thing that has surprised me, and I'm curious as to you guys, and the reason why I thought this would be interesting for our audience is because and that's why I mentioned about people who don't have a direct connection. It has really fascinated me. And I guess maybe part of it is good that we do feel such a connection to other people's pain and are empathetic. So I guess that part is good. But there's some people who were physically sick that I spoke with in the past couple of weeks. Because wondering about what the verdict was going to be, how things are going to turn out, and they have no connection whatsoever other than sharing the skin color of George Floyd. And that really amazed me. I don't know that I've ever felt that for someone I didn't have a direct connection to. Now I felt empathy and felt been physically affected, like when I lost my grandmother, and that was someone who was a relative. What do you think that says, guys? Do you think that also is because of the 24-hour news cycle that we kind of are a part of, and everything is just kind of talked about over and over? Do you think that's why people have become almost physically affected by the things that they're hearing, even outside themselves?
I think when you see a video of a man, being suffocated to death, and that video is replayed over and over again, and pretty much, a good percentage of Americans have seen that video. We all witnessed this murder. We can't not be involved in this. Though we have all, and I remember, the Rodney King verdict and the O.J. Simpson verdict, and I thought this might be different, but I don't know, because, Rodney King, there was a videotape showing the beating, and we saw that beating wasn't shared on social media back in 92 or 91, but we saw it televised over and over again, and still, the initial case, none of those 4 policemen were found guilty. It wasn't until the federal government prosecuted that as a civil rights case that 2 of the 4 of the policemen were found guilty and were I don't know if they actually served the 30 months in prison that they were supposed to, but justice is sometimes very hard won and sometimes not won, so could have gone either way.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting for me about that is, even though there is an element of like the fact that we were witness to this on video, dozens, if not hundreds of times over the course of the year, that certainly plays a big effect. And also the 24-hour news cycle, like you mentioned, certainly adds to the intensity of the story. But I want to believe also, I'm by no means a neurologist or a neuroscientist, but I have read a little bit about how the brain functions, and there's this thing that we have in our brains called mirror neurons, which allows us to look at someone else, another human being, for instance, and it is a scientific explanation for the experience of empathy. It's why babies can look at their mama's face and imitate it, right? Because there are those mirror neurons in the brain happening. And I think that, and I think, Cyrus, when you talk about, well, we don't have to personally know or have a connection to George Floyd or his family, but when we look at an act of violence like that, our mirror neurons kick in, and we look and we see that could have been me, that could have been my son, that could have been my father, that could have been my brother, and the humanity of that kicks in. So when you talk to people who are maybe getting physically sick over the anticipation of a verdict, I think it hits people in that vagus nerve where it says this, but for the grace of God, could have been me or someone that I love. And I think that when we have that realization, it makes it a lot more personal, and it is intensified by the number of exposures we have to that event. And so I think that all of that multiplied by the fact that we've all been trapped at home this year just completely intensifies our reaction to what's happening. So I think for me, that's my interpretation of the visceral nature with which we reacted to this.
Yeah. Well, what I would definitely say for our audience, both for those tuning in on the radio side and those joining us via the podcast, is this, and you guys feel free to chime in on this, but I think to do, as we kind of talked about here, find that space for yourself. I think it's one thing to be informed, and I think that is an important thing for all of us, but I think also making sure that you do protect your peace. And I think for people out there who felt as though they were able to get a breather, especially after the Derek Chauvin verdict, or even realizing that they're being seen where it comes to the anti-Asian hate crime bill being passed, making sure that they're looking for ways that they can be able to protect that peace, because it is so important, I think, for all of us, not only for ourselves physically, but I think also emotionally as well, guys.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, for those who are just tuning in, you're listening to Joy, Love, and Abundance. I'm Cyrus Webb. We're joined by Patrice Tanaka as well as Rodney Eric Lopez. We were just talking about, of course, some of the events that all of you have been seeing and how we can be able to not only, of course, to look at what's happening, but also to be able to move forward and be able to look for those ways, even as Rodney, I love the way you put that, to literally take note of our breath and the appreciation that can come just for that. It's now time for our part of the program where we kind of bring something that caught our attention. And Rodney, you were sharing with us a great story that you found. Why don't you share that with our audience?
Oh, thanks, Cyrus. Yeah, I was heartened by this story as soon as I saw it. This is a story that I'm picking up from the 60 Minutes broadcast from last weekend. A beautiful story, and at times sad, but for me, a story of human resilience and community. It's about the neighborhood and the community of South Atlanta, obviously in Georgia. And there's a nonprofit that serves the Atlanta area called Focused Community Strategies. And they were looking at this particular neighborhood of South Atlanta and determined that this neighborhood was what people sometimes call a food desert, meaning that the community didn't have enough access to affordable, high-quality, healthy foods. And this is a neighborhood that didn't have a major supermarket. So, maybe some small grocery stores or bodegas and lots of fast food, but no access to healthy food in a supermarket. And so this nonprofit, Focused Community Strategies, reached out to all of the major food chains and made a request to open a supermarket in this neighborhood. And from every single chain, they got a no, because their response was there isn't enough disposable income in this community to support a supermarket of those sizes. And so they just went right to work and said, well, if they're not going to come here, we're going to build our own. And so with community partners and other sponsors, they were able to open within the same facility both a supermarket, a fresh market, and a coffee shop. And so the supermarket was called Carver Market, and in the same facility, the coffee shop was called Community Grounds. And they did that back in 2015. And the importance of that is that this is part of a larger story just on health metrics in the African American community and how they lag behind the majority population in a number of important metrics. And while this community market was offering fresh produce, fresh food at an affordable rate, it also offered employment opportunities to people in the community. And the interesting thing about this story is that last year, in the middle of all of the other upheaval and uprising that we were experiencing around George Floyd, another African-American man, unfortunately, was killed by police. His name was Rayshard Brooks in the Atlanta community, and this happened last June. And the community, took to the streets and protested and advocated for themselves. But unfortunately, in the unrest that took place, the community market was vandalized. And that would be disheartening to see this pillar of a community since 2015 kind of torn down. But the community rallied, and they got together, they rebuilt, they restored this market. But that they didn't end there. They also used that as a rallying cry to march, to protest for better outcomes in their neighborhood. They they painted murals over graffiti-infested parts of the community, and they even organized a pop-up COVID vaccine clinic to make sure as many people in that community were vaccinated for COVID-19. And so what I found inspiring in this story, and going with our theme, right, of joy, love, and abundance, is that, the community was originally in the area of food. You could have said there was a scarcity of fresh food in this community, but people stood up, worked together, and created a more abundant approach to sustenance, to advocacy, and then the community rallied around it when it was challenged with a very severe situation. And so I just find stories like this really inspiring to me, because it's not about what one person does, it's about what a community does together when they work together and take a stand for something that they want. And so I think it's a wonderful story. You can find out more about it on the last 60 Minutes from last Sunday, the April 18th broadcast, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful story, I think.
Love that.
Yeah, that's great.
For myself, the story that stood out to me, as you guys know, I have the privilege of interviewing some amazing people, and one of the people I interviewed recently is an author named Melanie Gibson, and she shares her story of not only dealing with mental illness, but also finding peace through martial arts in a new book called Kicking and Screaming. And I thought it was appropriate, seeing that we're literally knocking on the door of May, and May is recognized as a Mental Health Awareness Month, among other things. She chronicles her journey about, even at a young age, not feeling wanted, not feeling herself, and how the one thing that brought her joy, martial arts, was taken away from her, and how that kind of made her spiral down a dark path. And rediscovering that as an adult really was a new awakening for her. And I love the title of the book, Kicking and Screaming, of course, going along with martial arts. But I love the fact that she kind of talks about, how really life is a struggle, and we have to fight for it. And she kind of chronicles her own journey of fighting for her life, and realizing that her life did have a purpose, and that she could make a difference. It's an amazing book. Again, it's called Kicking and Screaming. The author is Melanie D. Gibson. I just thought it was a great thing to be able to share, especially for those out there who are feeling lost and maybe feeling invisible, to know that they are definitely appreciated and seen. I think just wanted to share that with you guys. Patrice, what about you? What did you find this week that kind of stood out to you?
Well, you mentioned May being Mental Health Awareness Month, and May is also Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, AAPI Heritage Month. So there's a lot of activity happening, largely because of the increase in anti-Asian hate and violence, which I've talked about before on this show. But there are a lot of observances that are happening, and in fact, I'm organizing one with the Museum of Public Relations. So we have about 18 people who are going to be participating in this webinar on May 12th, 6 p.m. Eastern. It's 2 hours. It's prmuseum.org if anyone's interested in this free webinar. But we're going to talk about ways that communicators can get involved in stopping Asian hate, which there's a hashtag Stop Asian Hate, or hashtag Stop AAPI Hate. So we're just going to talk about a lot of different communication strategies that we can employ to address this growing problem. And so that's a very productive use of time, bringing together top communicators who are AAPI from that community as well. So I'm looking forward to that. And, a lot of companies, in fact, I'm doing a lot of speaking engagements and webinars in May, because a lot of companies are interested in supporting their Asian American and Pacific Islander employees and doing things to show their support and allyship in celebrating and observing AAPI Heritage Month. So that's a good thing. So thank you for asking.
Well, look, I just have to say I missed you guys last week. Again, I appreciate you guys bearing with me as I'm dealing with the changing weather situation here in the South. We never know what we're going to get. But at least I didn't lose power or anything, so that's always a great thing. And we definitely want to thank
God.
Yeah, exactly right, exactly. We definitely want to thank you, our audience, for being with us as we're getting ready to go into another week and usher in another month soon. We appreciate you all being with us, and we appreciate the opportunity to be able to share some of our joy, love, and abundance with you, and hoping that you're able to find your joy, love, and abundance, even in challenging situations as we discussed today. From myself, Patrice Tanaka, Rodney Eric Lopez, we say to you, continue to move forward, continue to be inspired, and always remember that you are loved and appreciated. Until next time, you all make it a great one. Take care.